Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier. In this presentation, I'll step back from the immediate causes of World War One, even the long-term causes, and take a look at the context in a little more detail. Context is critically important for good explanations. Even if you don't use a lot of it in an answer, brief references to the context can help clinch that top grade. I'm going to look at three things: the German question and the changed balance of power after 1871. I'll touch on international anarchy, including the arms race and the alliance system, though I'll cover it more in another presentation. And I'll look at the domestic pressures the great powers faced. And in doing this, I'll give a sense of what lay behind the rising tension in Europe's capitals. Now, I talked about the Congress system in my introductory presentation. This time, I want to begin with what came to be called the German question. Following its defeat of France, the German Empire was proclaimed in January 1871 in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, as shown on this slide. Germany's arrival as a force to be reckoned with undoubtedly unsettled the balance of power in Europe. Its population size, and a well-educated population to boot, its industrial as well as military strength, founded on its coal, iron and steel industries, as well as its geographical position at the centre of Europe, all meant that this would be an inevitable consequence, particularly when France's relative decline in economic and military strength is added to the equation. France was the nation in Europe that most feared a strong Germany. It had an overseas empire, but its economy had been overtaken by Germany, and it was painfully aware that Germany's population was growing as its own was shrinking. It had lost provinces to Germany, Alsace and Lorraine, and wanted them returned, though it was not seeking a war to bring that about. It knew it would lose. And to this, we must add Wilhelm II's badly thought-through policy of Weltpolitik, which left Britain and Russia wary of Germany too. But we must also consider the ailing empires in Europe, the Ottoman, the Habsburg and the Romanov empires, as they desperately tried to cling on to their status as great powers. And there was the rise of nationalism in the Balkans, particularly, but not only, Serb nationalism, in the very region where the three empires butted against each other. The Turks, the sick man of Europe. Austria-Hungary, fearful of Balkan nationalism, but also looking to make gains, Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example. And Russia, which saw itself as the protector of the Slavs in the Balkans, and which also looked to make gains. It wanted control of the Straits, and so Constantinople. As for Britain, it had its empire, and that was Britain's priority. It was still a great power, though it was aware of new economic rivals, America and Japan, and now Germany. The position it took with regard to Europe came to be known by the end of the 19th century as Britain's policy of splendid isolation, keeping out of European affairs unless it had to get involved. But that policy was beginning to be questioned, as Britain found itself without a friend, but with the potential for enemies, increasing as a result of colonial conflict, and with the cost of defending its empire increasing too. And all of this, everything outlined on the last two slides, led to events that would only increase tension. All of which brings us, as the 19th century came to an end and the 20th century began, to a period which some historians describe as one of international anarchy. A period of militarization, an arms race, alliances and war plans. Alliances that, even if defensive in nature, identified enemies, and war plans that might require defensive wars, and certainly called for mobilization before the other side mobilized. We must be very clear that the rationale of the commanders-in-chief, chiefs of staff and the generals is that wars are to be won. As simple as that. And this becomes very important in the July crisis. At the same time, all the key nations were facing enormous economic and social changes, and at a pace never before known, which led to political challenges. Industrialization had led to urbanization and a working class that was pressing for social reform and political power. And each nation had its own particular problems to deal with. The German elite, more than any other nation, felt threatened by socialism, but it was causing problems in France too, and in Russia. Austria-Hungary was troubled by rising nationalism within its multinational empire, whilst, as I've already referred to, the Ottoman Empire was regarded as the sick man of Europe, its empire seemingly close to collapsing. But there was another ailing great power, Russia. The humiliation over the Treaty of Berlin in 1878, which had given Austria-Hungary control over Bosnia-Herzegovina, and then Austria-Hungary's annexation of Bosnia-Herzegovina in 1908. Defeat in the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, followed by revolution. Russia, itself an empire, was showing signs of teetering on the brink. France was undergoing something of a crisis in self-confidence, and Britain, as well as its problems in Ireland, was facing a demand from women for the vote. Why is all this important? Because it put pressure on foreign policy. A Kaiser, a Tsar, an emperor needed a successful foreign policy to unite the country and ease the domestic pressure. And that leads me to point out the lack of control over the key decision makers. Austria-Hungary, Germany and Russia were still essentially autocracies. The power of elected bodies to influence decisions, the parliaments in Austria as well as in Hungary, the Reichstag in Germany or the Duma in Russia, were not particularly strong. So, important context for you that I will build on in the rest of my presentations on the causes of World War I. But I hope you found this one both interesting and useful. Don't forget to check out my website, History Made Easier. It's there to help you too. But thanks for listening, and good luck with your studies. Cheers.